Emma Rodriguez stood before her bedroom mirror, smoothing down the navy blue dress she had chosen for tonight's dinner. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her grandmother's pearl earrings. Tonight, she would finally meet the parents of James Blackwood, the man who had proposed to her 3 months ago beneath a canopy of stars on a beach in Malibu. James had warned her that his parents could be intimidating. Richard Blackwood was a former ambassador with connections spanning 3 continents, and Catherine Blackwood came from old money, the kind that whispered through generations rather than shouted. But Emma had built a successful architecture firm from nothing,
At the convened
designing
hearings.
sustainable buildings that
Yes,
had won her
that's
industry
correct.
recognition.
Now, let's move on to
She
the
told
next
herself she
section.
had nothing to prove, yet her racing heart suggested otherwise. The drive to the Blackwood estate took 40 minutes, winding through hills dotted with mansions until they reached iron gates that opened onto a sprawling property. The house itself was a masterpiece of classical architecture, all white columns and manicured gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly into the twilight. James squeezed her hand as they walked to the entrance. "You look beautiful, and they're going to love you. Just be yourself." Emma smiled, though anxiety still churned in her stomach. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood where a single mother worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. This world of inherited wealth and aristocratic bearing was as foreign to her as a distant planet. Richard Blackwood greeted them at the door, tall and silver-haired with eyes that assessed Emma in a single sweeping glance. "Miss Rodriguez, welcome. James has told us so much about you." Catherine appeared behind him, elegant in a cream-colored suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She extended a hand that felt cool and limp in Emma's grip. "How lovely to finally meet you, dear." They moved into a dining room that could have housed Emma's entire childhood apartment. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over a table set with china so delicate Emma feared breathing too hard near it. A staff of 3 served the first course, and conversation began politely enough. "So Emma," Catherine began, cutting her salad with precise movements, "James mentioned you studied at the State University. How resourceful." The words were kind, but something in the delivery made Emma's smile freeze. "Yes, I worked full-time while earning my degree. It taught me a lot about time management and determination." "I'm sure," Richard added. "My alma mater was Oxford, of course. Different world entirely." The conversation continued in this vein, each question from James's parents carrying a subtle weight that made Emma feel scrutinized rather than welcomed. Then, without warning, Richard turned to Catherine and spoke rapidly in French. Emma caught only a few words from her high school classes, not enough to understand the full meaning. Catherine responded, also in French, and they exchanged several sentences before Richard turned back to Emma with a smile. "We were just discussing the wine pairing. Catherine thinks the Bordeaux complements the duck beautifully." Emma nodded, but something felt off. The exchange had seemed too lengthy, too intense, to be merely about wine. Throughout the rest of the first course, James's parents repeatedly lapsed into French, offering brief, sanitized translations that Emma increasingly doubted were accurate. James seemed oblivious, engaging with his parents in English and occasionally adding comments when they spoke French. Emma realized he was fluent, moving seamlessly between languages, but he always translated for her benefit. Or at least, he translated something. As the main course arrived, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes brought fresh bread to the table. She was introduced as Rosa, the head housekeeper who had been with the family for 20 years. As Rosa leaned to place bread near Emma's plate, she whispered so softly that Emma almost missed it. "They are not saying what he tells you. Be careful, miss." Emma's fork clattered against her plate. She recovered quickly, covering the moment by reaching for water, but her mind raced. Rosa moved away without making eye contact, serving the others as if nothing had happened. Now deeply unsettled, Emma paid closer attention to the rhythm of conversation. Richard and Catherine would speak at length in French, animated and engaged, then James would offer Emma brief translations that seemed too simple, too polite compared to the energy of what had actually been said. During dessert, Catherine launched into what sounded like a story, gesturing expressively as she spoke French to Richard. They both laughed at something, and Richard nodded vigorously. Then Catherine turned to Emma with a placid smile. "I was just telling Richard about our trip to Paris last spring. The gardens were magnificent." But the story had lasted at least 3 minutes and involved what seemed like multiple people based on Catherine's gestures and the various tones she had used. Emma's chest tightened. What were they really saying? After dinner, they moved to the sitting room for coffee. Emma excused herself to find the restroom, and Rosa appeared in the hallway as if waiting for her. "Miss Rodriguez," Rosa said quietly, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "I should not interfere, but I cannot watch this happen again." "Watch what happened?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They do not approve of you." "They never approve." Rosa's expression was pained. "At dinner, they spoke of your background, your family, how you are unsuitable for their son. They make plans to separate you from Mr. James. The same plans they made for the others." "Others?" Emma felt cold despite the warmth of the house. "3 women before you. All kind, all good, all sent away by their words and their schemes." Rosa touched Emma's arm gently. "I am sorry to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth of what they say when you cannot understand." Emma's mind spun. How could this be happening? James clearly loved her. He had proposed with tears in his eyes, talking about building a life together. But now his parents were plotting against her in a language she couldn't speak, while James translated lies to keep her complacent. When Emma returned to the sitting room, she forced herself to remain composed. She smiled through the rest of the evening, accepting compliments about her dress and her career, all while watching Richard and Catherine exchange knowing glances when they thought she wasn't looking. As James drove her home that night, he was elated. "That went so well. I told you they'd warm up to you. My mother especially seemed to really connect with you." Emma stared out the window at passing streetlights. Yes, it was lovely. But inside, her thoughts churned with Rosa's warning and the memory of those lengthy French conversations that had been reduced to meaningless pleasantries in translation. If James's parents were truly plotting against her, she needed to understand exactly what they were saying. And if James was complicit in hiding their true words, she needed to know that too. That night, lying in bed, Emma made a decision. She pulled out her phone and searched for intensive French courses in the area. If the Blackwoods wanted to discuss her fate in a language they assumed she didn't understand, she would learn that language. She would uncover every word, every scheme, every insult they had hidden behind the barrier of translation. 3 days later, Emma enrolled in an accelerated French program, telling James she had always wanted to become multilingual for her international architecture clients. He supported the idea enthusiastically, never suspecting her true motivation. Emma threw herself into learning with an intensity that surprised even her. She hired a private tutor for daily sessions, listened to French podcasts during her commute, and practiced conversations with anyone who would engage. Her natural aptitude for languages, combined with powerful motivation, accelerated her progress beyond what she had imagined possible. Meanwhile, she began researching the Blackwood family more thoroughly. What she discovered troubled her deeply. James had been engaged twice before. Both engagements had ended abruptly, with the woman seemingly disappearing from his life completely. Online searches revealed little information about either woman, as if they had been scrubbed from public record. Emma's best friend Priya noticed the change in her demeanor. Over coffee one Saturday, Emma finally confided everything about the dinner, Rosa's warning, and her crash course in French. Priya's eyes widened. "So you're going undercover in your own relationship?" "That's either brilliant or completely insane, maybe both," Emma admitted. "But Priya, I need to know the truth. If James's parents are really trying to sabotage us, I need to hear it for myself. And if James is helping them by lying about the translations, then I need to know that too before I marry him." "What if you're wrong?" Priya asked gently. "What if Rosa misunderstood or exaggerated? Then I'll have learned French and discovered I'm being paranoid." Emma stirred her coffee absently. "But if I'm right, I'll have the truth. And I can decide what to do with it." 6 weeks after that fateful dinner, Emma sat in an upscale French restaurant, practicing her pronunciation with her tutor, Sophie. The older woman smiled with approval as Emma navigated complex verb tenses and idiomatic expressions. "Your progress is remarkable," Sophie said in French. "Most students take months to reach this level of fluency. You have a real gift," Emma thanked her, though she knew it wasn't gift but necessity driving her rapid improvement. Every night, she dreamed in fragments of French, her subconscious piecing together the language like a puzzle she desperately needed to solve. James remained blissfully unaware of her true motivation. He praised her dedication to learning, often testing her with simple phrases that she deliberately fumbled to avoid revealing how advanced she had become. The deception felt wrong, but Emma reminded herself that she was only protecting herself from a potentially larger deception. The Blackwoods had invited them to a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum, a glittering event that would gather the city's elite. Emma spent hours selecting the perfect gown, a deep emerald dress that complemented her complexion and conveyed confidence she didn't entirely feel. As they entered the museum's grand hall, Emma's breath caught at the opulence surrounding them. Crystal glasses clinked, chamber music floated through the air, and women dripped with jewelry that could fund small countries. James's hand rested protectively on her lower back as they navigated through the crowd. Richard and Catherine appeared almost immediately, Catherine resplendent in silver silk that probably cost more than Emma's car. They exchanged pleasantries, and Emma noticed how Catherine's eyes flickered over her dress with an expression she couldn't quite read. The evening progressed with James introducing Emma to various business associates and family friends. She smiled until her cheeks ached, making small talk about architecture and answering endless questions about her background. Some people seemed genuinely interested, others merely polite, and a few regarded her with barely concealed curiosity, as if wondering what someone like her was doing in a place like this. During dinner, Emma found herself seated between James and a distinguished older gentleman who spoke at length about his art collection. Across the table, Richard and Catherine sat with another couple, and as the meal progressed, they began speaking in rapid French. Emma's heart hammered as she recognized this as a moment. She kept her expression neutral, appearing to focus on her dinner companion's monologue about Renaissance paintings, but every fiber of her attention strained toward the conversation happening across the table. Catherine's voice carried clearly. "Did you see the dress? I suppose it's suitable for someone of her station, but hardly what we'd expect for a Blackwood family event." Richard responded. "She lacks the refinement necessary for our social circle. I've made inquiries into her family background. The mother worked as a cleaning woman in hotels." Can you imagine? Emma's fingers tightened on a fork, but she forced herself to remain still, to keep her face arranged in pleasant interest as the man beside her droned on about Michelangelo. The other woman at the table, Summer's wife whose name Emma had already forgotten, joined in. "And what of the previous girls? Surely James will see reason eventually." Catherine's laugh was light and cruel. "We've already begun laying the groundwork. Richard has contacted our attorney about drafting a prenuptial agreement so restrictive she'll refuse to sign it. When she balks at the terms, James will see her true interest in his money. It worked perfectly with Jessica. Jessica. That was the name of James's last fiancée, the one who had disappeared so completely from his life." Emma felt sick. Richard continued, "If that fails, we have other options. Catherine's friend owns the firm where the Rodriguez woman works. A word in the right ear about her instability, perhaps some questions about her professional ethics, and her career becomes untenable. She'll leave the city, and James will forget her like he forgot the others." Emma realized she had stopped breathing. These people, James's own parents, were casually discussing destroying her career and reputation over salmon and white wine, speaking freely because they believed themselves safe in their linguistic fortress. The conversation shifted to other topics, and Emma excused herself, mumbling something about the restroom. She made it to the ladies' lounge before her legs gave out, sinking onto a velvet bench as the full weight of what she had heard crashed over her. They had done this before. Multiple times. And James, what did James know? Had he been complicit in his parents' schemes, or was he as blind to their machinations as she had been? Priya's words echoed in her mind. What if James is helping them by lying about the translations? Emma had desperately wanted to believe James was innocent, that his parents were acting without his knowledge. But he translated their words. He had to know what they were really saying unless he didn't. Unless he was so conditioned to his parents' manipulation that he automatically softened their words, genuinely believing he was just making things sound more polite. Emma wanted to believe this version, wanted to trust that the man she loved wasn't actively deceiving her, but doubt had taken root, and it spread through her thoughts like poison. When Emma returned to the table, James immediately noticed her pallor. "Are you all right? You look unwell." "Just a headache," Emma lied, adding another deception to the growing pile between them. "Perhaps too much wine." James insisted they leave early, and during the car ride home, Emma studied his profile in the darkness. He looked concerned, genuine, completely unaware that his world was about to shatter. She almost told him everything right then, but something held her back. She needed more information, needed to understand the full scope of what she was facing. Over the following week, Emma became obsessed with uncovering the truth about James's previous relationships. She hired a private investigator, a decision that made her feel simultaneously empowered and ashamed. Was this what love had become? Spying and suspicion. The investigator's report arrived in a plain envelope that Emma opened with shaking hands. Inside were details about Jessica Chen and another woman named Rebecca Torres, both of whom had been engaged to James. Both engagements had ended abruptly after intensive involvement with his parents. Both women had left their jobs in the city shortly after the breakups. Most damning was a recorded phone conversation between Richard Blackwood and a business associate, obtained through legal but questionable means, in which Richard laughed about how easy it was to remove unsuitable women from James's life. "He's too trusting, too romantic. We've always had to protect him from his own poor judgment." Emma felt her heart break and reform harder, angrier. These people had systematically destroyed relationships and lives, and they were preparing to do the same to her. The question was, what would she do about it? She called Priya, who came over immediately with wine and fierce loyalty. "You need to tell James everything. Show him the evidence. He deserves to know what his parents are doing." "But what if he doesn't believe me?" Emma asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if he thinks I'm paranoid or vindictive? His parents have had his entire life to condition him to trust them over anyone else." "Then you'll know where his loyalty lies," Priya said firmly. "Emma, you can't marry someone you don't trust, and you can't trust him until you know whose side he's on. You have to force this confrontation." Emma knew Priya was right, but the thought of that conversation terrified her. Still, living in fear and deception terrified her more. She spent 3 days preparing, gathering evidence, rehearsing what she would say. She needed to be calm, rational, undeniable in her proof. Finally, on a quiet Sunday evening, Emma invited James to her apartment for dinner. She cooked his favorite meal, set the table carefully, and waited for him with a folder full of evidence that would change everything. James arrived with flowers and a smile that made Emma's resolve waver. He kissed her cheek, completely oblivious to the confrontation waiting for him. They ate mostly in silence, Emma's nerves making conversation impossible, James sensing her tension but misreading its source. After dinner, they settled on her couch with coffee, and Emma took a deep breath. "James, I need to talk to you about something important." "About your parents?" His expression immediately grew guarded. "What about them?" Emma opened the folder, her hand steady despite her racing heart. "At the gala last week, your parents spoke extensively in French during dinner. They believed I couldn't understand them." James looked confused. "Emma, what are you talking about?" "I've been taking French lessons, intensive ones, since that first dinner at their house." Emma held his gaze. "I understand everything now, James. Every word they've said around me." The color drained from James's face. "You've been secretly learning French to eavesdrop on my parents, to understand what they really think of me," Emma corrected. "Because that first night, your housekeeper Rosa warned me that the translations you were giving me weren't accurate. So yes, I learned French. And at the gala, I heard your mother and father discuss plans to destroy my career, to force me out of your life the same way they forced out Jessica and Rebecca." She produced the investigator's report, laying it on the coffee table between them. James stared at it as if it might bite him. "You hired an investigator." His voice was hollow. "You investigated my family. Your family is plotting against me," Emma said, her voice rising despite her intention to stay calm. "They've done it before, James. At least twice that I can confirm. They manipulate and scheme until the women you love are driven away, and then you just move on to the next one. Are you part of this? Have you been lying to me this entire time?" James's face transformed from shock to anger. "How dare you accuse me of something like that? I love you, Emma. Everything I've done has been to build a life with you." "Then explain the translations," Emma demanded. "Explain why your parents say terrible things about me in French, and you tell me they're discussing wine or the weather. Either you're lying to me, or you're so conditioned to the manipulation that you don't even hear it anymore. Which is it?" Part 3, the confrontation and resolution. James stood abruptly, pacing Emma's small living room like a caged animal. The silence stretched between them, thick with accusations and hurt. Finally, he sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I don't know," he whispered. "Emma, I honestly don't know." Emma's anger faltered at the defeat in his voice. "What do you mean you don't know?" James looked up, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I've always known my parents could be difficult, that they had strong opinions about who I should be with. But I thought I was protecting you by softening their words, by making their criticism seem less harsh. I never thought," he gestured helplessly at the report, "I never imagined they were actively plotting against you." "So you did change the translations," Emma said quietly. "You knew they were saying cruel things, and you lied to me about it." "Yes," James admitted, his voice breaking. "But Emma, I wasn't trying to deceive you. I was trying to spare your feelings. My parents come from a different generation, a different world. They judge people by standards that I don't agree with. I thought if I could just get them to see how incredible you are, they'd come around eventually. I thought I was buying us time. By lying to me, Emma said. James, do you understand that every time you changed their words, you took away my ability to make informed decisions about my own life? You decided what I should and shouldn't know, as if I were a child who couldn't handle the truth. You're right. James wiped his eyes roughly. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. But Emma, you have to believe me when I say I had no idea about the schemes, about destroying your career or forcing you to leave. I would never be part of something like that. Emma wanted to believe him. She studied his face, searching for signs of deception, but saw only genuine anguish. Read the report, she said finally, pushing the folder toward him. Read about what happened to Jessica and Rebecca. Then tell me if you really didn't know. James read in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he looked physically ill. Jessica told me my parents wanted her to sign an extremely restrictive prenup. She said it made her feel like they thought she was a gold digger, and she couldn't marry into a family that would never trust her. I believed her reasons. I never questioned whether my parents had deliberately designed the prenup to drive her away and Rebecca. Emma prompted. Rebecca's career fell apart right before our wedding. She got accused of plagiarism at the university where she taught. The charges were eventually dropped, but the damage to her reputation was done. She left the city for a fresh start, and I was so wrapped up in defending her to my parents that I never considered. He broke off, his voice thick with emotion. They did it. They destroyed her career to get rid of her. The full weight of realization crashed over James. For several minutes, he couldn't speak, just sat with his hands clenched into fists, his breathing ragged. Emma watched him process the truth about his parents, about the pattern of manipulation that had shaped his entire romantic life. What do we do now? James asked finally, looking at Emma with raw vulnerability. How do we move forward from this? Emma had thought about this question constantly over the past weeks, rehearsing different scenarios in her mind. I need you to stand with me when I confront your parents. I need you to hear, really hear, what they say without filtering it or making excuses for them. And I need you to set boundaries with them, real ones, even if it costs you your relationship with them. James nodded slowly. Okay. When? This weekend, Emma said. Your mother invited us to brunch on Sunday. I think that's the perfect time to show them I understand every word they've been saying. Emma spent the days before the brunch preparing mentally and emotionally. She rehearsed phrases in French, anticipating objections and manipulations. Priya helped her select an outfit that projected confidence and power, a crisp white pantsuit that said she wouldn't be intimidated. Sunday morning arrived with unseasonably cold weather, as if nature itself reflected the chill Emma felt in her heart. James picked her up in silence, both of them tense with anticipation. During the drive to his parents' estate, he reached over and squeezed her hand. Whatever happens today, I'm with you. I should have protected you from the beginning, should have seen what they were doing. I can't change the past, but I can make sure they never hurt you again. Emma squeezed back, drawing strength from his presence. The gates of the Blackwood estate loomed before them, and Emma took a deep breath as they opened. Richard and Catherine greeted them at the door with their usual polished smiles. Emma noticed how Catherine's gaze swept over her outfit with subtle disapproval, how Richard's handshake was a fraction too brief to be genuinely warm. They gathered in the sunroom for brunch, a spread of pastries and fruit laid out on fine china. For the first few minutes, conversation remained in English and superficially pleasant. Then, inevitably, Richard turned to Catherine and began speaking in French. I received a call from Thompson at the law firm. He's prepared the prenuptial documents we discussed. They're quite comprehensive in protecting James's assets. Emma's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral, appearing to focus on spreading jam on her croissant. Catherine responded in French. Excellent. Once she sees the terms, she'll either reveal her true mercenary nature by fighting them, or she'll leave on her own. Either way, we'll have exposed her. James started to translate, his voice automatic. They're discussing some legal matters for the family trust. Emma set down her knife with a deliberate clink that made everyone look at her. She met Catherine's eyes directly and spoke in perfect, fluent French. Actually, they're discussing the prenuptial agreement you've designed to drive me away from your son, just like you drove away Jessica and Rebecca. The silence that fell was absolute. Catherine's face went white, then red. Richard's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. James stared at Emma with a mixture of shock and fierce pride. Emma continued in French, her voice steady and cold. For weeks, I've listened to you insult my background, mock my family, and plot to destroy my career. You've spoken freely, believing yourself safe because I couldn't understand. But I understood everything. Every cruel word. Every manipulation. Every scheme. She switched to English, her eyes moving between Richard and Catherine. I know what you did to Jessica Chan. I know about Rebecca Torres. I know how you've systematically removed women from James's life because they didn't meet your impossible standards. And I know you plan to do the same to me. This is absurd, Catherine sputtered, also switching to English. James, your fiancé has clearly become paranoid and unstable. Don't, James said quietly, but with steel in his voice. Mother, don't insult both of us by denying what we all know is true. Emma heard you. I've read the evidence. I know what you've done. Richard attempted to regain control. James, you need to understand that everything we've done has been to protect you. These women weren't suitable for our family. Our family? James stood, his voice rising. You mean your vision of what our family should be? Mother, father, I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, molding myself to your expectations. But Emma is right. You don't protect people by manipulating them. You don't show love by destroying their relationships. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, whether genuine or tactical, Emma couldn't tell. James, you're our only son. We've given you everything, sacrificed everything for your success. How can you turn on us like this for a woman you barely know? I've known Emma for 2 years, James said firmly. And in that time, she's shown me more genuine care and honesty than I've received from you in decades. Yes, you gave me opportunities and resources, and I'm grateful for that. But gratitude doesn't mean I owe you control over my entire life. Emma stood beside James, drawing strength from his presence. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, I understand that my background doesn't match what you envision for your son. My mother cleaned hotel rooms. I worked my way through state college. I don't come from money or prestigious connections. But I love your son, and I've built a successful career through my own merit. That should be enough. It will never be enough, Richard said coldly, his mask of civility finally dropping. You are fundamentally unsuitable for this family, Miss Rodriguez. If James marries you, he'll be cut off financially. The trust fund, the properties, the business connections, all of it will be withheld. See how long your love lasts when you're both struggling to maintain the lifestyle he's accustomed to. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you really think I care about the money? I've built my own tech company from the ground up. I'm financially independent of you and have been for years. The only thing you can take from me is your presence in my life, and honestly, after today, I'm not sure that's much of a loss. Catherine stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. If you walk out that door with her, you are no longer our son. The words hung in the air, final and cruel. Emma saw James flinch, saw decades of conditioning warring with his desire to choose his own path. She touched his arm gently, ready to step back if he couldn't make this break, understanding how difficult it was to sever family ties. But James straightened his shoulders and took Emma's hand. Then I guess I'm no longer your son. He looked at his parents with sadness rather than anger. I hope someday you'll realize that love isn't about control or social status. It's about accepting people as they are and supporting their happiness. Emma makes me happy. She makes me want to be a better person. That should be enough for you, but if it's not, then we have nothing more to say to each other. They walked out together, and Emma didn't look back. She heard Catherine calling after them, her voice breaking, whether with genuine grief or frustrated manipulation, Emma would never know. James's hand trembled in hers, but his steps didn't falter. In the car, James sat silently for several minutes before starting the engine. I just lost my family. No, Emma said gently. You just set boundaries with toxic people who happen to be your parents. That's not the same thing. And James, if they truly love you, they'll eventually respect your choice and come back into your life on healthier terms. If they don't, then you've lost people who only loved you conditionally, and that's not real love anyway. James turned to her, tears streaming down his face. How are you so wise? I'm not, Emma admitted. I'm terrified. I just confronted two of the most powerful people I've ever met and potentially destroyed your relationship with your family. Part of me wonders if I should have just walked away and saved you this pain. James cupped her face in his hands. Emma Rodriguez, you saved me. I've been trapped in their web of expectations and manipulation my whole life. You showed me what real honesty looks like, what real love looks like. Yes, this hurts. Yes, I'm grieving the parents I wish I had rather than the ones I actually have. But I'm also free for the first time in my life. And I'm free because you were brave enough to fight for us. They drove to Emma's apartment and spent the rest of the day talking, processing, and occasionally crying. James shared stories from his childhood, patterns of control and manipulation he had never recognized before. Emma listened, offered comfort, and marveled at the resilience of the men she loved. Over the following months, life settled into a new normal. Richard and Catherine made several attempts to reconcile, each one conditional on James leaving Emma. Each time, he refused. Eventually, the contact ceased altogether, though James admitted the silence hurt more than he had expected. Emma's career flourished, unimpeded by sabotage. She won a prestigious design competition and expanded her firm, hiring 2 new architects. James's tech company secured major funding, and together they began planning a future built on mutual respect and honesty. The wedding, when it finally happened, was small and intimate. Emma's mother cried happy tears while Priya served as maid of honor. Rosa, the housekeeper who had first worn Emma, attended as an honored guest. The Blackwood chairs remained conspicuously empty, but their absence felt like freedom rather than loss. Standing at the altar, looking into James's eyes as they exchanged vows they had written themselves, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had learned French to uncover deception, but in the process had discovered her own strength. She had confronted power and manipulation, and emerged with her integrity intact. As James slid the ring onto her finger, he whispered in French, "Thank you for saving us both." Emma smiled and responded in the same language. "Thank you for choosing us." The guests applauded, unaware of the private exchange of the language that had once been a weapon of exclusion but had become a symbol of their triumph. Emma kissed her husband, tasting salt from happy tears, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with honesty and courage lighting their way. In the end, the secret language that was meant to divide them had instead revealed the truth, and the truth, painful as it was, had set them free.